It is time again to color in your gray matter with Joe Pedotto's Anaglyph Jukebox.
Welcome to today's edition of the Anaglyph Jukebox. You never know what you'll find on the old jukebox. Let's press B31. Okay, we've got Gustave Whitehead, aviation pioneer and first in flight. This is something of a local cause celeb where the jukebox lives. The claim is that an aviation pioneer named Gustave Whitehead built and flew a plane, the Condor No. 21, on August 14, 1901 in Bridgeport, Connecticut, 2 years before the Wright brothers. The Bridgeport Herald, a weekly newspaper, reported that Whitehead had made the first manned, powered, controlled, sustained flight in a heavier-than-air craft on August 18, 1901. Fun fact, Whitehead's plane was roadable, if not strictly street legal. The wings folded up for driving on land. You know that Hollywood tough guy actor and lifelong pothead, Robert Mitchum, was from Bridgeport, Connecticut, and that's the kind of plane he'd drive. The Fairfield Museum puts its weight behind Whitehead's first-in-flight claim and heralds the 2013 announcement in Jane's All About Airplanes that Gustave Whitehead should be credited with having flown in Fairfield and Stratford in 1901. The museum is less likely to tell you that Jane's corporate office walked that claim back 2 years later in 2015. The article was, quote, intended to stimulate discussion about first in flight and, quote, reflected editor Paul Jackson's opinion on the issue and not that of IHS Janes. The publication said Mr. Jackson was unavailable to comment, on account of somebody hit him in the mouth with a sock full of quarters. And that somebody was the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, specifically Tom Crouch, a senior curator in the Aeronautics Department at the National Air and Space Museum. On April 6, 2013, Crouch posted the flight claims of Gustave Whitehead. He labeled the article written by the chief editor of the Bridgeport Herald questionable. He pointed out that none of the other 4 daily newspapers mentioned this historic flight. It didn't even make the front page of the weekly Bridgeport Herald. It was published 5 pages inside on a page devoted to human interest features and other so-called soft news stories. It's worth noting that in July 1901, page 5 had an article about the Dog Man of Wyndham and the Great White Shark of the Lexington wreck, which protected gold bullion that had sunk with the ship. Critics claim this newspaper account has all the hallmarks of yet another public relations campaign designed to attract investors to Whitehead's work. Detailed examination of Whitehead's early flying machines from 1897 to 1903 show at least an inconsistent approach to flight design, sometimes taking a step or two backward along the way. But perhaps this is most damning. Crouch writes, over the next decade, as aviators in America and Europe took to the sky following the pattern established by the Wright brothers, Whitehead would continue to build aircraft for other enthusiasts. Not one of those powered machines ever left the ground. But as Robert Mitchum would say, baby, I don't care. Whitehead enthusiasts and supporters have amassed a lot of material in support of their claim. Books have been written by Stella Randolph, William O'Dwyer, and Andy Kash. Blogs have been posted, and T-shirts have been screen printed. That newspapers in Bridgeport are not to be believed is a given, but that doesn't explain the alleged dark conspiracy between Orville Wright and the Smithsonian over credit for first in flight. My grandfather's dying words to me were, never trust a man from Dayton, Ohio. Orville gave the Smithsonian the Wright Flyer No. 1 to display only after agreeing that, quote, the Smithsonian shall not state any aircraft earlier than the Wright aeroplane of 1903 was capable of carrying a man under its own power in controlled flight. So, the lawyers wrote the history in this case. That can't be a good idea. I took these shots on August 15th, 2021 with my Fuji W3 during a Whitehead weekend celebration at Sikorsky Airport. Star of the show had to be Andy Kash's Whitehead Replica No. 21 Condor. The replica has a 36-foot wingspan and is 36 feet from the tip of the nose to the end of the tail, with a 16-foot main body, 3 feet wide and 3 feet deep. It weighs about 400 pounds and is powered by 2 ultralight 20-horsepower engines. The wings are made of bamboo and silk, and the body and propellers are made of Sitka spruce. In December 1986, Kash flew his Condor Replica for 330 feet at the airport. Quote, "I had been as high as 6 feet off the ground. That's a lot further than the Wright brothers went on their famous first flight," Kash said. Unfortunately, that test flight ended when Kash's Condor collided with a Connecticut Post photographer on the runway, proving once again that you can get too close to a story.
Now we're going to hear from NYSA member Tony Brown, who resides in Ireland. Tony is new to stereo photography, having just begun at age 18. No, I mean 81. Great world, man. But has been collecting and shooting with film since the 50s. He has an understanding of Photoshop and began experimenting with manipulating stereo imagery, the result of which you're about to see. You may ask a few questions in the chat, but Tony will be available in the after party to answer real questions in detail, because I'm sure you're going to have some, because it's really fascinating what he's come up with. What he's probably discovered that maybe some of you know, and many of you I doubt know, because I didn't know it, and I looked at what he did, and it adds something. It's another arrow in the quiver if you're interested in manipulating imagery. It really is. And what did we say before? It's about perception, you know. Because I know myself, even when I take a picture, a 3D photograph, sometimes I'll take them, especially if they're semi-hypers even. I look at the thing and I go, that's not what I'm seeing, even though I got the 2 eyes and the thing recorded with the 2 eyes, but that's not what I'm experiencing. I'm seeing it, obviously, but I'm not experiencing that. And how do you do it? So a lot of manipulation, the fundamental point for doing manipulation is to make it realer than real, so it gets perceived as an experience. Man, I'm glad I said that when I recorded that, because I'm going to have to go back and listen to what I just said. But anyway, this week we put a piece together to make it easy to show, and we're going to let it go right now. Roll it, Mr. Heiser.
Good day, everyone. This may, of course, be old hat to all of you. We'll see. The objective is to add some depth information for distant objects on a conventional stereo, or in fact to add foregrounds to hyperstereos. For want of a better name, I've called them tri-shots. It consists essentially of taking a conventional stereo, in my case as the left-hand side of a cha-cha, and a single cha, a meter or more apart, to the right, as the third image. The basic procedure then is to take the 3 images and place them in an editing software like Photoshop. The left-hand image, in my case, is the background, and the 2 right-hand images are on layers 1 and 2 and can be masked. The mask doesn't need to be very precise, as you can see here, and provides you with a single right-hand image for processing with the left, giving you the tri-shot output. The degree to which the depth is exaggerated depends on how far away you take the third cha shot and is up to the photographer. It's useful to have an area like water or grass in which you can put the mask so that it doesn't have much of an effect. It doesn't produce oddities. And here are several examples. These photos are of no particular value, just as a means of demonstrating the concept only. They're played in slow sequence, marked with conventional or tri-shot, and one of them shows the third char and the mask required to include it. You can see how trivial the mask is. I became stereo aware 18 months ago, just before the pandemic arrived. In my early attempts, I was using 1950s film cameras in a cha-cha mode, and soon realized that the lens separation of the eyes is completely inadequate when it comes to photographing distant subjects, because there's no depth separation at that distance. So I then used a much longer baseline, maybe a meter between shots for the cha-cha, and that worked fine. However, foregrounds became completely unreconcilable to the eyes when I tried to convert them to the picture. So you had to leave foregrounds out of it when using wide base cha-cha. Not only that, with cha-cha I couldn't photograph a scene with people that were moving, or animals, or birds, or water, because of the time distance between the two photographs. So I then bought a Fuji W3 and found that the distance between the lenses, which is 75mm on a W3, was quite inadequate to deal with the far distant objects I was photographing. The foregrounds were beautiful, and it was very easy to use, and you could photograph action and video. But as for photographing landscapes and architecture, they were too far away to be in stereo. So then I bought a couple of XP60 cameras, also from Fuji. They're not made any longer, but they're very cheap on eBay. And I mounted them on a base bar such that I could still swing them for making close-ups. They had a lens separation at that point of 100mm. The two cameras are parallel for distant photographs. The right-hand one can be swung in to be symmetrical with the left when taking close-ups. The synchronization is still only finger sync, but that was much better for water and for people walking and animals. So that seemed to be the answer, except that with 100mm even, it still wasn't good enough for distant subjects. But the XP60 is designed to use for cha-cha, and when you take the first image in cha-cha mode, it remains faintly on the screen so that you can line up the second image with it and not waste too much cropping. That worked perfectly well for a while, except that it was difficult to reconcile foreground and distant. So I came up with this idea to use conventional stereo for the left-hand shot and a single cha, shall we say, for the right-hand shot. So we now have one left-hand image and two right-hand images, one of them close to the left and the other at a distance from the left. After pairing them together in Stereo Photo Maker for convenience and outputting them as side-by-side images, I then put them into Photoshop and compile them on separate layers such that I can mask one or other of the right-hand shots, so that I'm using the foreground from the first right-hand shot and the background from the second right-hand shot. Strangely enough, the masking does not need to be precise. The eye seems to do most of the work for you. And these are the results I'm getting at the moment. It's not for purists, but it might well suit your purpose, and it does mine.
NYSA Member Benjamin Martin is a professional photographer located here in New York. His curiosity stemmed from taking a course at the School of Visual Arts and has resulted in his experimenting with photogrammetry. Now, it's been my experience that passion creates progress. That's actually one of my company mottos, by the way. And his passion for image capture led him to experimenting with not only 3D, but 3D printing. Ben will be available to answer some of your questions in the after party, because I'm sure you're going to have them, because he covers a big gamut of stuff here. So we're going to walk through this. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Benjamin Martin. Take it away, Ben.
Thanks, John. As John said, I began endeavoring into 3D printing earlier this year, and it led me to take a course in AutoCAD design at the School of Visual Arts. And through that course, I was introduced to photogrammetry, which really intrigued me. It's a process where you can capture 3D objects, you can scan 3D objects and have a 3D volumetric rendering at the end of it. And you just can use standard optical cameras and a turntable. I'm going to show you one that I made, a custom build that automates the process, but you don't have to have any real fancy equipment particularly. So this is
explain the turntable for a second. Just explain
sure,
it,
yeah.
how you created that.
Yeah, so I don't know if you can see my top-down camera, but I have so yeah, this is an automated turntable that I made to capture the photogrammetry process. So this I can show you kind of what it does here. So it stops at intervals around a 360-degree field, and it pops a picture at every one of those intervals. So you decide how many views you want in totality, and then it just divides that into the whole 360 degrees. And again, you could do it manually. You can just sort of twist it and rotate it on a standard turntable. But as I said, I had the will and the drive and the equipment and interest, so I 3D printed this little customized tool for it.
What drove you into 3D printing quickly? What got you into 3D printing?
Really, just sort of the similar thing that drew me to.
Kill the flash. I'm sorry, kill the flash.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, we're making everyone have a secret. It's really just to allow sort of design, sort of thoughts and the real world to become one, to retrofit older hardware, to upcycle things, to build custom rigs and things like that for lighting and for different experiments in electronic builds that I'm making. So yeah.
And so the next tie-in was, once you realized you could do that, then the photogrammetry thing. How did you make that connection?
It was just I just thought it was an interesting way. Like you can capture unique objects in the world and then have this sort of digital version, the digital asset that you can manipulate and view and sort of have in a permanent archival way. Specifically, this object is an ocarina that I got in Costa Rica years ago when I went there with my brother, and he had been there since, and he hadn't been able to find one that was similar. So I was like, man, this is a great opportunity to capture something unique that doesn't sort of seem to exist otherwise. Yeah, that was kind of my jumping off point.
I like the ocarina from Costa Rica. I think it's a song called it.
Right, and it's a little like samba. But I was actually able to 3D print from the capture this little version of this guy. It's pretty, a little like this, and it's scalable. But I can show you. So basically, you're going to want to set up that. Let me show you my.
Yeah, if you could share the screen with what your normal setup, the customary setup is, that'd be great. Thank you. Did we lose the overhead?
Let's see.
No, it's fine. I cut away from it because.
No worries. Thank you, Dave. Thank you.
So so this is sort of what the setup looks like a pretty standard setup. If you can see my screen. So ultimately, I don't know if you can. Yeah, that's my little manual, or I'm sorry, my automatic turntable. But you can knock off markings like a clock face, so you kind of made the full rotation, or pretty good coverage. And you want to have pretty regular intervals between the shots, just for the back-end software to not jug along. Once you get your setup, you're going to capture images that look almost like a stop-motion animation. It's going to be a set that's just very, very slightly different. You capture all these images, and there's a software program called Metashape that allows you to import those images, and it stitches them together as individual camera views. And so you'll get, once you kind of run it through the software, you get this point cloud, like sort of a loose point cloud of the scanned object.
And a point cloud is just basically measurement data, loads of measurement data, right? That was just taken through a process, which is, right?
Yeah, it's just sort of demarcations in space that show you where the barrier, the borders of an object are.
And all those numbers, and all those numbers
are all different.
Yeah.
Sorry, they're the images. They're the different vantage points, and the way that software interpolates them is sees them as different cameras rotating around at the object. So the software is pretty processor heavy, so you kind of set it and then just let it go for a long time. So the higher quality captures you can get, the easier that part is, and because it can be frustrating if you you go through the whole rigmarole and you realize that there are all these errors, you know, and you let your computer run for a couple of hours. Yeah, I think it's worth it. I mean, this is the render, the capture I was able to get from literally still images.
And how did
Yeah,
it
so
figure out the bottom?
So I was fortunate, like the surface is sort of offset from the ground on this one, so the camera is actually able to see mostly underneath it, but where the surface contacts the object, I had to do a little bit of cleaning up in a software called Mesh Mixer, and I can give links to all these things that are available to everybody at the end. But yeah, I mean, I just thought it was a really interesting process that, you know, when you think of sort of like 3D capture, I tend to think of like motion capture and those little pinpoint suits that people are wearing in Hollywood productions, and that it's something that's so far flung, you know, inaccessible. But I mean, literally with your standard camera and a turntable, and, you know, some decent lighting, you can capture 3D objects.
And now from that same process, can you create like a 3D image, like a lenticular image or a side by side or something? Is there a way to extrapolate that and kind of get a stereo image as opposed to an object?
Yeah, to be able to get like a traditional stereo view, is like we all love. Yeah, so you can basically, once you have the scan, it exists as if it's a 3D object. So you can in different viewing software, you can have it so it allows you to view it in Anaglyph 3D, or you can export a different viewpoints as Anaglyph 3D views or Anaglyph 3D stills. So yeah, it gives you that ability to sort of have that plasticity on the back end, and then you can integrate it into, you know, into VR, into augmented reality, in the Looking Glass now. So yeah, there's just this new world of opportunities that this type of you know, capturing method is just sort of, you know, getting its time in the spotlight and its utility.
How long does it take you to go from the I know you said several hours, depending upon, I guess, the resolution you're looking for, or what's the correlation between how many shots you take and how long it takes you to see a process? Is it easier just like to do a short thing and then see how it's coming out, or how do you manage that? How do you manage that?
I think your best bet is to capture as many views as you can, and it actually makes the processing faster, just because it has to do less sort of interpolation. It has to sort of, you know, figure, okay, well, this was the last view, and this point moved this far. It has to do less sort of computation between those two vantage points. So as many images as you can throw at it, you're better off just in terms of processing time at the end.
And again, what's coming out of that camera is nothing special. There's no lasers, there's no infrared, there's nothing. It's just a camera, a regular still. Well, many
Absolutely.
stills.
I mean, yeah, you can. I mean, I did it with my iPhone initially, and then I've done it with like point and shoot Canon cameras, and then I did the last set that I did the 3D capture of this with my DSLR. But I mean, you want to just get, you know, as high resolution images as you can. And for my purposes, my goal was to 3D print, so the surface texture and that information wasn't as important to me to get perfect. But again, I mean, if you want to have like very high resolution texture information, you can capture that.
What was the file size for each one of those images? In other words, are they JPEGs? Are they TIFFs? Are they no compression? What's the deal?
So, yeah, no, that's a good question. So I shot them as RAW, but then converted them to TIFF, and that I use TIFF in the processing software, again, just to have the most depth of information and the most just sort of the widest histogram. What you're viewing now are JPEGs just for the purposes of viewability, just for rendering, like what I showed you, sort of the slideshow. But yeah, TIFFs are ideal.
I guess, okay, so TIFFs are ideal, but older cameras can shoot those too. So does it matter in terms of the resolution of the camera, or is it just does that
I mean,
make
not
it?
particularly. One advantage is that basically, you know, like the print resolution is, you know, 240 or 300 DPI, and most cameras sort of like, you're thinking of the resolution in terms of a print resolution, but this is kind of based on the screen resolution. So your resolution of your camera is going to go further. So it's kind of like shooting video as opposed to shooting stills print. So I mean, I would say use the best camera you have access to and try it. I think you'll get something. You'll get something that's probably usable. you know, depending on what your criteria is.
And that little turntable you built, right?
Mhm.
Which I'm very impressed with. You put the whole thing together.
Thanks.
You know, I love people who are driven, who just get off the couch. I mean, that's the perfect example of getting off the couch. So, what did that cost? Just in material, not in your time, because
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah. So, well, actually, I'll pop the hood now. I think it's a good time. So, it was basically, it's a little bit hard to say. So, a couple of spools of plastic, essentially, because it was all the sort of body of it is 3D printed, and then these are all sort of like off the shelf open source electronics. So, I'm gonna say it's less than $100, maybe around $100 in all, just the parts. I had some of the pieces like the LCD screen and this little toggle remote I hacked off of like a Wiimote that I got at a thrift store. So just try to be scrappy and resourceful. This is just, just a little servo motor that was a few bucks, Bluetooth remote, and Arduino is really what the backbone of it is, which I'm sure some people have used those. They're little open source microcontrollers. Yeah.
Now,
So
what is
not
your back?
terribly.
What is your back? Yeah, I was gonna. You were getting to that point.
Yeah.
What's your background in electronics or any of that stuff? Do you have any background in it?
I'm self-taught. I've done a lot of work in electronics and building or fabricating like custom installations. Like I have a piece, permanent installation in Soho that went up about a year or so ago. That's a kinetic LED sculpture. And so I'm self-taught in electronics and engineering, but it was really just, curiosity and wanting to be able to make my own tools and toys and just to be able to experiment with things that like often are just very expensive and either unaffordable or hard to justify cost. So yeah, self-taught.
Now, solder or just things plug in?
This is a combination because I was sort of unsure about all of the fittings and like kind of how the code was going to work. I left a lot of this with DuPont connectors, which are the ones that you can pull out, but I do a lot of soldering work too. So with this, I would say solder as much as you can. If you go, I'll leave a link to the file if anyone's interested in making the same thing. I would solder as much as you can because the wiring gets to be a rat's nest really quickly.
Did it work the first time you plugged it in?
Oh man, good question. Parts of it work. So there are a lot of different protocols going on. It's there's the motor, the logic of the motor happening. There's sending the signal to fire the camera. Then there's sort of the logic of the LCD telling you what's going on and then controlling it. So not everything worked at once simultaneously. And then I found out that some of the features were not really optimal. Like literally inside of it, initially there was a little Bluetooth remote controller, and they had hooked up a servo motor to physically push the button on the remote to send the signal. And so I got rid of that mechanism and I just wired in the button to be pressed electronically. So like little kind of goofy things like that. I just kind of.
And you programmed that, and all that program was done via with your Mac, or did you have to have a PC or any of that kind of stuff?
It's open source software. It's for any. It's
source.
It's Arduino software, so it's Linux, Mac, PC, anything you want to write it to. It's a version of C++ is what I wrote it in. So it's pretty clunky, low level code, but you can do a lot of copying and pasting.
And your 3D printer, how much did that cost you? How much did that cost you?
So I have a Creality V2, which it was like $300. It's not incredibly expensive. I upgraded some of the parts that as I saw fit, like they're the components that are like, so I put in probably $120 of extra parts in it. And yeah, the resolution of this little guy here is like, you can get pretty significantly higher resolution than this, but I highly recommend if anyone's interested in 3D printing at all, like Creality makes great ones that are not going to break the bank, and you can sort of see if you're interested in it, because I know a lot of people are worried.
Keep that shot, Dave. Keep that shot. If you go back to that shot, if you keep that shot, with the overhead.
Yeah. A lot of people are nervous that they're going to get a 3D printer and they're just going to use it for a week and never use it again, which I understand. But I found it to be I use it all the time, so I've had it for about a year and a half.
Now, all of that was what was 3D printed there? I got to know that. Not the case. The case was separate.
The case. So the base, everything except for the electronic and the button. So this little, this little joystick is not 3D printed. You can see I can move it through the joystick too. The LCD, this button, basically any metal part or electronics is not 3D printed, but the blue part here, the actual physical chassis, the black part, and the purple gears and the gear mechanism are all 3D printed.
Now, if you 3D print it, they come out the different colors. You choose the color, and did you already include that in your expense of building it? Like when you said less than 100, was that with the gook? I mean, with the official.
Uh-huh. Yeah, with the plastics and everything. So yeah, the colors of the plastic. I wanted it to look cool. I mean, you don't even see
cool.
like when it's operating, you don't see the purple part, but I wanted to, I had these colors available. It's PLA plastic, which is, it's really cheap. It's like, I don't know, around $20 per kilo. So it took a very long time to print these pieces. But again, with 3D printing, you set it, you make sure it's working correctly, and then you just delete it.
And okay, so I'll ask you the same question I asked you before.
Sure.
Did the 3D printing stuff all work the first time through? In other words, did it come out right from the printer?
Surprisingly, yes. Thank goodness, because it is. I've had other 3D prints where you think it's going good, and you come back hours later, and you just have a pile of spaghetti, and it's the most disappointing dinner of spaghetti you've ever had. But luckily, this one came out well. I actually had it set up where I have a live stream like monitor to my 3D printer, so I can view it remotely. And if anything's going wrong, I can stop it remotely. So I was kind of checking up on it too, just because it was such a long print.
And that little thing that was in the overhead with the color, was that your breakfast? What was that?
Oh, so this is actually this is one of my sort of pet, you'd say. This is a Venus flytrap that I picked up recently. I've been doing some horticulture recently, but I thought this is an interesting illustration of just of things that may be good subjects for photogrammetry, and that it's unique. It's one of a kind as it is, and it's never going to be just like this.
And you're getting me nervous. It's got water in it. Could you move it from a? I hate to see the thing filled with water.
Oh God, you just see a puff of smoke, and
then you'd be blaming me. Well, you'd have every right to. No, that's so interesting. Interesting. There we go.
Yes. Then what's cool is you can actually use this for like cinematic, video things if you want, and then you can capture if you're shooting, object for eBay or things, you can use it for that. So it's not just for photogrammetry, but if you want, it's a really good tool for
that. Man, what can I say, man? That was excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, I very clever, and I love, like I said before, someone with passion. You follow through your ideas. I love seeing people who do that. Had an idea.
Thanks.
Was it going to work? Who knows? But you did it. Oh, holy shit. It's fantastic. Oh, hey, everybody. You know what's coming.
Thank you.
Clapping.
Thank you.
You definitely gave us a lot of great information. And maybe in the after party, we'll just send us the links and stuff, because I think there might be people who may be as brave as you. Who knows? But it's fun. It's wonderful to. I can't wait to see you back at our live events. When that happens.
Oh yeah, I'll bring all sorts of stuff.
You were so engaging. You were so engaging in this. It's just wonderful to see you from Brooklyn, New York. So we got Brooklyn. And Tony, you're in Ireland, right? You're I believe. Well, that's okay. We covered the world. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. Part 1 of my interview with Dr. Brian May. Now I got a trick question. You ready for this one? Is it good?
Yeah.
Wheatstone, Brewster, who would you prefer to be?
Oh, it's got to be Wheatstone. Of course, it has to be Wheatstone. He had so many facets to his genius, so many avenues that he pursued. He's the discoverer of the Wheatstone Bridge, which is this electrical way of finding out what the resistance of things is.
The concertina.
The concertina, lots of musical studies, discovering how the waves of music affect our ears, all this incredible study. And then he just quietly invented stereoscopic photography before photography was invented. It's outrageous. It boggles my mind that the likes of Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, all of the genius people of the Renaissance never got it. They never figured out what stereopsis was. They got perspective. Stereopsis? No. And if people argue about that, I'm ready for them, because I can vouch that nobody tweaked it until Charles Wheatstone, 1832, got it. and didn't even think it was important enough to publish at that moment. He just sort of put it away for a while and thought about it for a while, got on with his other studies. And it was a few years later, but it's a stupendous discovery, isn't it? And it's linked into all these evolutionary tales of the human race, not just the human race, but the whole race of mammals, and a lot further than that. Why do we have two eyes? For a very, very good reason. How did that happen? I mean, I remember there's these stories about Darwin having nightmares about the evolution of the human eye, aren't there? You know, how could that happen? Something so complex. One eye, a miracle. Two eyes, and the whole mechanism that goes with it in our brain of divining distance and solidity from that. It's an incredible job that evolution has done, isn't it? It's almost beyond belief. It almost makes you think it couldn't have happened. Here we are. You got two eyes, I got two eyes, for a very good reason.
and the retina, you know, physically generates more heat and needs more metabolic process than anything in the body.
Is that
Natural
right?
retina. It's a fact,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, it's a fact. It uses more energy than anything in the body. The retina.
Wow.
Yeah, that's why about after 40 it starts burning out a little bit. And, you know, evolution had that one thing. Probably never meant to last that long, but goodness knows we're doing a good job at both of us. Thank you for taking the time to visit us on your Saturday here in New York.